Welcome to the Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. I'm your host, George Roberts. Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today, we interview John Casmon, founder of the Casmon Capital Group and host of Multifamily Insights. Welcome, John.
George, thank you for having me today. I am really excited to be here and to talk to you a little bit more about investing.
Wonderful. And I'm very excited to spend some time with John Casmon because every time I do, I get a little bit smarter. Why don't you start us off by telling the audience who is John Casmon?
Yeah, so listen, I live in Cincinnati, but don't hold that against me. I am born and raised in Cleveland. I am a Midwest kid. I lived in Detroit, Chicago, all over the Midwest. And the thing that I love is the people you meet here. I've always been surrounded by great people who have helped me throughout my career, whether it was in advertising and marketing, which I did for 15 years, or investing in real estate, which I've been doing for the last 10 years, and working with other investors for the last 5 years. Now, if you add all that up, I might sound really, really old. I started investing in real estate while I was working a W-2 job, like many other people, and ultimately, launched into full-time real estate investing. As you called out, my company is Casmon Capital Group, and I also host a podcast called Multifamily Insights, where we connect with other investors to help them identify all the insights they need to be a better investor, whether that's figuring out the best places to invest, attracting capital for deals, or figuring out how to identify the best deals for their investing needs.
Awesome. And that dovetails perfectly with what I wanted to ask you next. How did you pick your market? So you are a Midwest guy, just like me. And tell us where you're investing and why.
Yeah, so I love kind of the lower part of the Midwest and the upper part of the Southeast. So think about Southwest Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee. I love the Carolinas, Georgia. So that region, that strip of the country is where we're really focused. And our rationale is really simple. One, I live in Cincinnati, so I'm looking for places that I can access, that I can get to in a short drive or a quick flight. I'm also looking for places where there's strong growth. I'm looking at population growth. I'm looking at job growth. I'm looking at diverse industries, but I'm also looking at places where the competition isn't so strong that it's impossible or really difficult to find a quality deal. So when we think about certain markets that are so hot right now, I don't know how sustainable it is. The thing that I love about, some of the Midwest markets and the markets we just talked about is that they don't necessarily ever get overheated, or they also don't fall down to the point where they are below what the rest of the country is doing. So I love the stability of this region. And I think having those strong fundamentals where you're still looking at the growth, you're still looking at appreciation potential, but you're looking at markets where they're not being overinflated or overinvested in to the point where it's artificially inflating the purchase prices.
I love it. We're not dealing with Las Vegas or San Francisco here. So great rationale there. And of course, you did mention you came from marketing. You were marketing exec before you jumped over into the multifamily space. And I know that's something that you have applied successfully to your investing. So tell us some of your insights.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing was it really took me a while to put two and two together that this business, when you think about multifamily investing, particularly if you're syndicating or working with other investors, but this business is just that, it's a business. So you have to connect with people. You have to understand the business side of it. And in business, you have sales and marketing. So you have to be able to build it. You have to be able to communicate to other people. You have to understand what your messages are. And that part of it just took me a while to really understand. Building a personal brand is really important because if people don't know what your product is or your service is, how are they ever going to do business with you if they don't know what it is that you do? So hosting a podcast, launching a blog, doing meetups, doing in-person events. These are all just different forms of marketing, So I did marketing for 15 years for big brands, Nike, Coors Light, Mountain Dew, Buick, GMC, big brands, but the personal brand side, I've worked with influencers. I've worked with micro influencers. I understood social media, but I never saw myself as quote unquote the brand. I never saw myself as in front of the camera. I'm used to being behind the camera. So that took a little bit of time to get comfortable doing. And like anyone else, just a little trepidation to put on the camera, and you start to criticize yourself and think about what you look like, and maybe get a little self-conscious and how you're talking, and maybe you shouldn't sound like that, or whatever the case may be. But the reality is you have to put yourself out there if you're going to grow your business. What's your message? Who are you connecting with? How can you help people? I call it really the 3 C's to attracting capital. And the first C is going to be confidence. And the confidence comes from the work. It comes from preparation. You may not have experience right now, but you have to put in the work to learn, to practice, to get better and better at what you're doing. So once you have confidence, then it comes down to credibility. What is it in your past that demonstrates you can be capable and you can be successful at what you're doing, raising capital or buying real estate or whatever the case may be? Maybe it's your corporate background. Maybe it is your real estate experience up to this point. Maybe you have experience as a broker or a real estate agent or as a mortgage broker. But what is it in your background that builds your credibility? What successes have you had that you can leverage for the space? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Do you have a coach or mentor or advisor that you can lean on as a part of your team? But how are you building that credibility? And then the third C is going to be connections. Who do you know? Who are you connected to? And who are you talking to in your network that may have an interest in investing with you? With those 3 C's, confidence, credibility, and connections, you can actually grow your real estate business.
I love it. And certainly you have gotten very comfortable behind the microphone. 350 episodes, I believe, of Multifamily Insights.
Yeah, 350 episodes plus and counting, right? We've done twice a week now for the last 2+ years. And you're right, you get more and more comfortable. And I think that's the key, though. The key is there was a point in time when I had 0 episodes. And I recorded the first one. I thought I sounded terrible, and I didn't know if I was going to actually put the show out. And that's just part of the process, right? And I think every podcaster goes through that. You may, even before you get to that, you probably start with, well, does the world really want to hear from me? What do I have to say? What do I have to contribute? Right. And it's a process that many people go through. And the people who succeed are the people who are willing to turn that voice off and do it anyway, and learn from it, grow from it, get better at it. And those are your successful entrepreneurs, whether we're talking real estate or entrepreneur or anything else. But that is the key to success. You've got to try. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to embarrass yourself a little bit if it comes to that, but learn from it. And if you learn from it and you make adjustments, you hopefully won't have to suffer those same results twice in a row.
Yeah, I love it. The question, does the world need another podcast? Maybe not, but the best answer I've ever heard to that, but maybe the people in your network, right? They need to hear from you. So even if the world doesn't need that, what are we up to? 2 billion podcasts, maybe, if not very soon. But your people in your network, right? You might be the only person that can bring the message of the power of multifamily investing to them.
Yeah, you're spot on. I had a phone call not too long ago from a high school classmate, and we were we knew each other, right? But we weren't close friends or anything like that. We knew each other, and she just sent me a message on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'd really like to talk to you. Do you have 10 minutes?" And I said, "Sure." And we got on the phone, and she said, "Hey, I have this house that I own in North Carolina, and I have a resident here who stopped paying rent, and I don't know what to do. This guy reached out to me saying he wants to buy it. I'm upside down on my payments, and you're the only person I know who's in real estate from the post you make, and I just want to know, like, what do you like? What should I do?" Now, I've been out of high school a long time, so long enough where, again, to be top of mind for someone to reach out to. And this is not an investor. This is not someone I did business with, but she recognized me as someone who understood real estate and could help her through that. And I did. I coached her through it. I told her what to do. She was in the car going down to the property at that time. And I coached her through it, and she came back and she actually did what I asked her to do, got it together, and sold it at a profit, a couple months later. And that's the thing, is like, I don't even know if she listens to the podcast, but she knew that I was in real estate and I was doing this thing. And clearly she said, "Hey, John is probably pretty knowledgeable and probably the most knowledgeable person I have in this space. Let me reach out to him and see if he can give me some advice." And to your point, the world may not need a podcast. And if your goal is to get 1 million downloads, you may be sorely disappointed. But if you can influence the people around you with your way of thinking as far as investment opportunities, you can build up your credibility by surrounding yourself with more accomplished investors and folks who are doing the business. You can learn from them, you can grow from them, you can build relationships with them. Bit easier for you. So I'm a big fan of anyone building a personal brand. I'm not saying everybody needs to run out and start a podcast, but you should be thinking about how the world sees you. People in your personal network, how do they view you? Is that the view you want them to have? You want them to have a different view? And if you want them to have a different view, what are you doing to influence that view right now? You have to take control of the messaging. And those are, little PR tactics, but you have to get in front of it. You have to put out the image and the version of yourself that you want the world to see. You're able to do that consistently and show up again and again and again, you will slowly change people's perception of who you are.
Amazing. And so one of the things that I'm hearing in that is that you have been a mentor to people. I believe you are you taking on coaching students now?
We are. So I have a program I launched called the Capital Impact Club. And a lot of it stemmed from having conversations with people and really just wanting to make sure that they had the right platform to grow. So think about it like this. There are a lot of different education platforms out there that will teach you how to invest. There is a big difference in teaching someone how to invest and helping them invest. For instance, a lot of people are having a hard time finding deals that pencil today, underwriting deals. Well, the next level of that is understanding how to be creative, how to sit down and figure out where there might be opportunities, how to structure an offer, how to negotiate with a seller. When you're talking about building a personal brand, raising capital, attracting capital for your deals, what kind of things are you saying? What kind of things are you doing? How frequently are you putting your message out there? All these different steps, it helps to have somebody with a blueprint. So we help provide a blueprint for our active investors who want to learn the business. We help them learn not everything from terminology and all your basic items up to philosophy, as well as building that personal brand. Taking those 15 years of marketing experience that I have, work with some of the biggest names in the industry to understand how to build a personal brand that attracts capital for yourself and allows you to position yourself in a way where you can be that thought leader within your circle. And if you have that, now you have opportunity, and be by surrounding yourself with those kind of individuals with that level of knowledge, you position yourself to be a successful investor.
Awesome. That's very exciting. And then let me ask you a little bit more about your investing. I always love to hear acquisition stories. So
Yeah.
I believe you've been a sponsor for 5 years or more. You must have some pretty amazing long and winding journeys to that closing table.
Yeah, it's funny. I just did an interview on my show with a guy named Kent. Kent's a good friend of mine, and Kent was just talking about one of his deals, and he said literally last week at the closing table. I mean, he was literally in his car driving to the title company, and the lender he had pulled out, so he had to turn around, go home, and make some phone calls to more lenders, get an extension, and all this other stuff. We've been fortunate not to have that happen for us. But we've certainly been in situations where we've had to get an extension or something wasn't right at the closing table and it took a little bit longer to get the deal done. I think the biggest thing is just having a mindset of getting the deal done. If that's the intention, having that mindset of how can we get this done? What adjustments can we make? Hey, if I did this, would you do that? Having that collaborative mindset is really the biggest thing you could take when you're getting down to the wire and at that closing table, because people's, emotions get high, brokers want to get paid, and it just becomes a thing where everybody's a little revved up. So you kind of have to calm everyone down, figure out what the solutions are if that's needed, and make sure you get the deal done.
Awesome. Well, I always like to say that a great deal has a great story behind it. Do you want to tell us the story behind any of your deals?
Yeah, we did a 80 unit deal over the summer, and it's in Florence, Kentucky. And the thing that was really interesting to me is it's a deal that I looked at before. And I remember my business partner, she brought it to me and said, "Hey, there's this deal. I think it looks really good." And I'm looking at it like, this still looks extremely familiar. Was this out there before? And she was like, "Yes, it was." So I went back through my notes, and I keep all of my stuff. So I went back. I pulled up my previous underwriting on it and looked at where I was at based on where I thought the value was. And she and I kind of compared notes and went through it. And the thing that was interesting is just how things change over time. Let's think about this, right? We all have seen what's happened over the last year with valuations, with rents and inflation and all that, right? So over time, these things go up. So what ended up happening on that deal in particular is that um, what they were asking for did not make sense 2 years ago when they were asking it. They were stuck on a number. So 2 years ago, nope, no way, it didn't make sense. Last year, man, this is looking more and more realistic and close. And as we got to this year, whoa, this actually works really nicely. Not just that, but the upside potential was much greater than you could have anticipated looking at their numbers. And it was one of those deals where there really wasn't a great comp in the marketplace. So it was hard to gauge how much room there really was. These were all townhomes. So it wasn't like, regular apartments. They were all townhomes. There weren't really a bunch of townhomes in the area, but this place was 100% occupied. So for us, we really had to get down and look at all the other properties that we could find, the larger apartment units, any townhomes that were even in adjacent or similar neighborhoods or cities, and really put together a hypothesis. And for us, like, we protect our downside first and foremost. So if we're wrong, if we're overshooting the numbers, we want to make sure we still have a good cash flowing asset. But if we're right, we can crush this deal. And that was the way we looked at it, and we were able to do that on that one.
Awesome. I love it. So it's a business, not so much of the big one that got away, but this is where deals often come back around. A lot of people, it's not uncommon. The deal that you get is the one that you were looking at and nearly closed before. Cool stuff. So then let's see, we talked about markets and how you moved from, you've been in real estate investing, I think, for 10 years. What were you doing before you went into multifamily?
Yeah, I was doing advertising and marketing for those brands I mentioned.
Oh, I thought you said you were in real estate for 10 years, but
I've
multifamily
been
for
in,
five.
so I've been, yeah, I was doing advertising and marketing for 15 years. And then for the last 10 years, I've been investing. So from 2011, 12 to 2017, that was just my own personal portfolio with my wife. So that was us investing, building up our own personal portfolio. In 2017, we started to work with other investors. And that's where we launched Casmon Capital Group and started and all of that. And since then, we've invested as general partners in over 1,000 units, valued at over $100 million. So we've done all of that in the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow. That's an amazing and meteoric rise. You got to love this business. I mean, there's such a need right now for people who can come in and manage apartments, who can reposition them, et cetera. We're so far behind on housing stock that people who are able to make it into this business often able to just amass amazing portfolios within a few years. That's just wonderful. How many of your deals have gone full cycle?
Yeah, you know what? This year has been crazy for that, man. We've sold one, two, we've sold 3 properties so far this year. We have another 2 under contract to sell this year. So we've really gone. I mean, we have 5 of our properties that have gone full cycle, and that's really the bulk of that 1,000+ unit that I mentioned. The bulk of that we are closing out. So we're now trying to ramp up and find new opportunities. And one of the things for us is like pivoting our business plan and our approach. We started with, like a lot of people, with value add deals. And we still love value add deals, but we're paying more attention to the actual property now. We're looking at properties that either is a big value add component where we feel insulated, or we're buying properties that are, a little bit nicer, better condition, a little bit more of an operations play, a little bit more value add through amenities, but trying to focus less on, spending $10,000 a unit to renovate it, and more about just being smart and savvy with the types of improvements we make to a property.
Yeah, I love it. That's a very common progression and something that I think a lot of younger investors, or newer investors, I should say, not necessarily young investors, need to hear. It's really hard to have more than a very small number of value add projects going at any one time. Very, very intensive. Well, a few minutes ago, you touched on inflation. So I guess that's what's on everybody's mind these days. So what do you think? Let's say the economic landscape in general, not just inflation, holds for multifamily real estate.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm no economist, and I think too many people are pretending to that act like they have a crystal ball. No one knows. What I can tell you is we try to stick to the fundamentals, and I believe that if you stick to fundamentals, you protect yourself, you protect your investors. What does that mean? That means we buy for cash flow first and foremost. We look for some sort of value add or forced appreciation potential. We look in markets where there's demand, there's growth, there's appreciation potential that's happening in the marketplace, and we try to put solid loans on these deals so that we control when we exit. If we invest with that philosophy, we give ourselves a great chance to be successful. Now, with inflation and the economy and those kind of things, when it comes to multifamily investing, what we're ultimately trying to understand is demand. What's demand for this multifamily property? We know that demand is strong right now, and I don't think inflation or rising interest rates will change that. The reason is you have to look at who's investing in these properties. These are accredited investors. These are investors that own other real estate or other businesses. These are family offices. These are institutional investors. These are funds. These are international investors who are looking to park their capital in secured real estate in the US. Those things are not going to change, especially coming off of the global shutdown. So you have so many people who are looking to park their capital in secured real estate right now. And when you think about what's changed from now to say 2009, 2010, well, one of the things you have is the Jobs Act, which makes it easier for people to actually pool resources together to go out and buy these properties. You have crowdfunding. Again, you have these family offices, and you have the internet, which makes it so much easier to communicate and to buy properties from overseas and never even seen these properties. So you have so many factors that have increased demand for multifamily that I'm not sure you're going to see that dwindle over the next few years. I'm not seeing a factor or multiple factors that can drive that outside of an overall economic downturn. Even still, if you go back to 2008, 2009, that was driven really by the finance industry. The way the banking terms were, the fact they were lending funds to people who had no means of being able to pay this money back. That's not happening now. You still have to qualify for these loans. And in the multifamily space, I'm not talking distressed, but we're talking about properties that are 85, 90% occupied, cash flowing assets, rents are going up. There are a lot of great factors there. So to expect all of those properties to either, to go bad, or for investors to decide, hey, I don't want to invest in this. I'm not seeing a reason that would happen. So I think that you're going to continue to see more of the same for the next few years until there's something that forces the market to change.
I love it. So what I'm hearing is that if you focus on the fundamentals and cash flow, then it doesn't really matter so much what's going on with the economy. You should come out with a solid, well-performing asset.
The thing I love about multifamily is the value of that property only matters on 2 days. It matters the day
Mhm.
you buy it and the day you sell it. And you get to control that second day if you invest with those fundamentals.
I love it. And in between, you've got that cash flow to carry you forward. And I also appreciate the way that you sort of underscored that the last recession, nobody knows what the next recession looks like, but there's not a whole lot of reason to believe that a housing and finance driven recession is what is necessarily on the horizon. And when it comes, again, it's probably going to be a little bit different. Can't just go fighting the last battle.
Yeah, and I think too, like, for many of us, that 2008, 2009 is probably the only recession people felt, right? Outside of
Mhm.
what we just had with COVID. So it's easy to look at that, but there have been plenty of recessions throughout the
Mhm.
history. And, when you look at the way interest rates are being handled, the way, our currency is, being handled, I'll just say,
Mhm.
um, you'll see that there's a lot of influence that is trying to make sure we don't face any hardships from an economic standpoint, nothing too drastic. So interest rates are still at a historical lows. There's still a lot of demand. And I think it's a good time to have your investments in hard appreciating assets that, appreciate like real estate.
Yeah, I love it. And glad you mentioned interest rates remaining at historic lows may not be a bad time to hold if inflation does take grip as it appears to have taken grip. Well, let's move on to, yeah, it's pretty grim, the dismal science. Maybe we can move on to the next phase of the interview and talk about something more inspirational. So, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, can you tell us a couple of books that have really helped you to forge your way?
Yeah, man, lots of books. I think first and foremost, one of my favorite books is a book called The Power of Focus. Now, this is a book I started reading. Geez, I read this right out of college. And so Mark Victor Hansen, I believe. And it's just a great book. It just talks about the ability to lock in on what you want and being intentional and making, the list of what you want, focusing on getting those things, writing down your goals, and focusing on what it takes to accomplish that. So I think it's a really good book. It was really helpful for me when I was reading it. What I've since not graduated to, what I love now that is almost replaced The Power of Focus as my favorite book, is a book called Atomic Habits. And this is a book by James Clear. And I love this book. So I'm always raving about this book. I got to get James on my show one day. But this book is amazing because it is applicable immediately. It is not one of those books where you read it and it sounds good and you feel good, but nothing changes because you really don't know where to start. This is the book that helps you understand the immediate changes you can make to become the person you want to be. This is about habits. This is about the tiny things you do every single day. I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to lose 10 pounds. Well, it's not really that you want to lose 10 pounds. It's that you want to be in better shape, that you want to be fit, that you want to be healthy, that you want to have more energy, right? Whatever it is that you're really trying to accomplish, well, that's where we start. And the first thing you do is identify those triggers or those habits. So if you are not fit now or you want to lose 10 pounds, what are the things that are stopping you, or what are the things you should be doing? What's the very first step? If I want to be a better runner, if I want to run more frequently, the first step might be to change my clothes. I got to go change into my running clothes, or it might be to go grab my iPod or whatever. It might be to put on my running shoes. But that's the first habit. And that's what I got to make a habit. It's not focusing on running. It's not focusing on running, 30 minutes a day. That might be too daunting. But I could change my clothes. Even if I take them clothes off and go back into what I had on before, the habit is changing the clothes, right? And if I could focus on that, it makes it easier. Maybe it's drinking water, whatever it is. But what's the very first habit? Do that, make that a habit, and then you can stack new habits on top of that. But I love the book. It's a phenomenal book. You should check it out. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Right, I'm going to just go on a limb. I feel like I've heard about this book. I haven't read it, but does this have something to do in the first chapter about like arranging your desk for success, or is that a different habit book?
I'm trying to remember. I think he does talk about that a little bit. But it's not a big part of it. I think he's just saying like, yeah, it might be, for instance, I have funny, I lost the other one. I used to have these two bowls on my desk, and I put marbles in one side. And so one of the habits is talking to other investors. So one of the habit might be sit down, I do a call, I take a marble out of the left bowl, put in the right bowl, right? And I have to do this until the bowl's empty. But that's the trigger. That's more of a mechanism to help us get there. It's not necessarily the initial thing to build a habit, but it's a good book. You should, definitely check it out. And it really helps to break down the steps, because it's more about the small nuances of the steps than the end goal, which I think too often we focus on the end goal and not the steps that help us get to that end goal.
I love it. That's just a beautiful way to set yourself up for success. You're just really arranging your environment and making it easy for you to take that next step. Whatever you feel you've been blocked doing, then all of a sudden becomes a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Now, as an entrepreneur, who would you say is your greatest influence?
Ooh, as an entrepreneur, my greater influence, there's so many people, man. I don't even know where to start. I would say, um, As a young person, my stepmother, she's the first entrepreneur that I saw and watched. And the first time I got to see it in person, she gave me a task, and she came across these latex gloves, right? These regular plain old latex gloves, and there was a box of 60 of them. And we drove around the city of Cleveland, and I was maybe 10 years old. And I took these boxes and I went inside to all these beauty salons and I sold them for $3. And I, probably took 3 or 4 hours, sold all the boxes. We made $180 and also learned about entrepreneurialism and what it takes to run a business. Because in my head, we just made $180, 50-50 partnership. She was going to take 90. I was going to take 90. And then I learned that, didn't quite work that way. She took her 60 for the initial purchase of the boxes. So there's 120 in profit. She said, hey, I drove around the city. There's gas prices. There's the operations, the admin costs. So by the time we got down to it, I think I made like 15 or 20 bucks. So I told her I quit. I said, I'm not doing it again. I quit. I didn't do all this to make 20 bucks because I saw it, right? I collected all the money. So I collected the 180. And she gave me an analogy and she said, if you worked at McDonald's and you were the cashier and you collected all the money, do you think you're getting 50% of it? And I said, well, no. And she's like, so why in the world would you think you get 50% of this? And I'm like, yeah, so nope. I learned 2 things that day. 1, negotiate your compensation up front. 2, understand the difference between being an employee and being a partner. And I thought I was a partner. She saw me as an employee. I quit immediately, but I learned a lot of lessons from her. And I think it took me down this pathway. So I still am very grateful for it.
I love that. That's like economics in one lesson. Well, I don't think I can top that. So I think we're just going to cut it off right here. John Casmon, thank you so much for coming on the Foundry.
Absolutely, George. Thank you for having me. And I just want to say, if anyone wants to learn more about some of the stuff we've got going on, you can go to my website, casmoncapital.com. We do have a sample deal package there if anyone wants to check that out. And if you want to learn more about the coaching platform, you'll see a link for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely, George. Thanks for having me on.